Hello and welcome to Scale Stuff. In this week's video, I'm going to be building and reviewing this very old Tamiya Phantom kit. I picked up this relic at a charity shop for £2, and for that price, you really can't grumble whatever's in the box. This model is in 1 to 100th scale that you don't see very often these days, and I thought it would be interesting to build one of these Tamiya old kits to see how they shape up compared to their new releases. In the box you get a short black and white instruction sheet in very bad English, one bag containing the sprues to build the plane, and a sheet of decals to mark up 2 versions of plane, and another bag containing more sprues and the single clear part for the cockpit. Loose in the box in this kit is a stand. First quick look at the sprues is looking alright so far. The parts look pretty clean and flash free for an old kit. The detail doesn't look as good as a lot of the new kits though, and some parts are showing ejection port marks that will need to be cleaned up. As a side note, this box stinks of chocolate, which is really strange. I'm used to second-hand kits smelling of smoke and cigarettes, but not chocolate, and I'm not sure how I feel about that. Tamiya first released this kit in 1969, and this is a 1969 version of the kit when the tooling was new, so maybe that's why there isn't much flash. Tamiya was still re-releasing this kit up into 2004 though, so hopefully this kit was doing something right. Though I'm not sure about that, having seen the state of some of Tamiya's armour offerings that they refuse to let die. Anyway, with the quick look out of the way, let's get on with the build. First thing on the menu is the fuselage. I've already pre-painted the seats and cockpit area in Tamiya XF24 dark grey. The 2 fuselage pieces go together okay, but do need a good squeeze to get them to go together flush. Then it's time to add the jet intakes. These don't have any real keying in points, but with a bit of tweaking do line up quite well. Adding the rear wings is simple, but if you push them in too far, they will cause the tail section of the plane to open up, so make sure to watch out for that. With all the main bits on, there is just the main wing to add. This drops into place, but it's looking like there might be a good few gaps around it. I'm going to fill these in with some green stuff, but before I carry on with the build, I'm going to have to leave it to dry, as there's a lot of seam lines that need to be cleaned up once the model's safer to handle. With the main bit dry and sanded down, I'm adding the jet nozzles to the plane. These go on mindlessly simple, but there's a bit of a gap above these that will need to be filled. Then it's on to adding the landing gear covers. I'm building this plane wheels up, so this step's really quick and easy, and I've just dropped the covers in. The wheels the kit come with look quite nice though, and most of them are moulded into 1 or 2 bits, meaning that they should be reasonably robust and simple to add. With that step done, I'm building the stand. Again, it's mindless to make, but I want this to be nice and dry for when I get to the painting stage, which is fast approaching. I do like the fact that this kit comes with a stand though, as it's always nice to have the option to build the plane in flight. Next it's time to sort out the plane's payload, first by building the fuel tanks for the plane. These are dead easy to make, just watch out for the notch cut for the pylon. These do have some pretty hefty seam lines on them that are going to need to be cleaned up later. I know it's not looking like that in the video, but they're getting nuked out by the lighting. Then it's on to adding the missiles to the plane. These just slot into grooves on the underside of it. The missiles have some nasty ejection ports on them that need either filling or sanding to get rid of. While the main missiles are drying, there are a couple of missiles to add to pylons. These go together with a standard butt joint. The rear of the missile lines up to the rear of the pylon, and yeah, that's about it. It's not the greatest join. While the pylon missiles are drying, I'm sanding back the seam lines on the fuel tanks before adding them and the last two missiles to the plane. And with them on, that completes the massively quick and easy build stage of this model. You can tell this is a really old kit as you're building it, as yeah, it's all really simple. But having said that, it still looks alright when it's together. Now it's onto the painting. Here I'm giving the model a base coat using some Humbrol matte white. This isn't the best way about painting this plane. White on white's a bit of a nightmare to spray, but it's all I've got that will make a good base coat for the following camo paint scheme. As always, I'm spraying this up off screen and outside to avoid fumigating myself. Next it's on to painting the browns on the model. For this I'm using Vallejo US Air Force Brown. As soon as I put the brush to model I realised that I should have done the underside grey first, but it is what it is. The base coat got a bit of pitting to it. I'm not sure if this is due to spraying too much paint over the already white plastic, or the fact that I nipped out to spray this in between a break in the rain of a spring shower. And yeah, it could be humidity's fault, or it could be my fault. Either way, I'm just going to have to roll with it. This paint I'm going to build up in a number of layers to get a nice even base coat. With the brown on, it's onto the green. For the light green, I'm using Vallejo dark green. This time I'm using the right green for this. I'm trying to follow the paint plan on the instructions in the kit, but it's not 100% accurate. Next it's onto painting the other green. For this I'm using Vallejo US forest green, trying to work darker paints over light. Lastly, and completely in the wrong order for the main colours, I'm painting US Air Force light grey onto the underside. Really, like I mentioned before, I should have done this first, as it's going to take a good few coats to get this looking like a solid colour. Thankfully, the middle of the model and the inside of the wings are mostly white, so these areas won't take too long to get a decent coat on. Main colour on, now it's time to paint the black on the model. These areas are pretty tiny and require a steady hand, so most of this is going to be done off screen. I'm painting the nose cone and tail metal areas in black as a base coat. Next it's on to painting the metal areas on the plane. Firstly I'm doing the lighter metallic areas. For this I'm using Army Painter plate mail. One thing I've always liked about the Phantom is the area just behind the jets. It almost looks like a suit of armour back there protecting the plane against its own propulsion. Light area done, now I'm moving on to painting the darker metallic areas. For this I'm using Army Painter plate mail silver mixed in with a little bit of black. This darker metal shows as a band across the wings and the main funnels, channels for the jet exhausts. Adding this paint is really starting to tie the model up and make it look right. Next there is a little detail to get on the canopy. Here I'm painting the front screen in Army Painter electric blue. I think this is a window tint. Ideally I would use clear Tamiya blue on this part, but I don't have any of that, and having seen window tints in real life, they look pretty solid, so yeah, this is just going to have to do. Now it's time to give the model a coat of oil paint. Like a kid with a new toy at the moment, I can't get enough of the stuff when it comes to painting aircraft and oils. For this, I'm doing the standard wax on, wax off approach, painting the oils on with a brush to get it into all the gaps, and then rubbing the oil off with damp tissue paper to leave the oils in all the panel lines. This model took an oil coat okay, but a slight amount of pitting in the paint was also highlighted. Overall though, I still like the effect on the model, and sometimes when painting, that's all that matters. You've kind of got to roll with the punches. As always, I'm going to leave this to dry over the weekend to make sure it's safe to handle later on. With the oil paint dry a few days later, it's time to add the decals. As you can see from the yellowing, these decals are really old and needed a bit of help to stick to the model. Off camera, I dragged the decals through some watered down PVA glue to give them some extra stick, as I think their stick disappeared about 50 years ago. Despite their age though, the decals are actually quite thin and are going on well. The decal guide for this model, however, is a bit rubbish and it's hard to work out what goes where. However, it's nothing Google can't help out with, so 10 points to Google Door there. Anyway, with the decals on, I think that's the model done. This is the finished model. I think it's turned out quite well considering the age of the kit, and I had a lot of fun building this quick model in between some bigger projects. In conclusion, the Tamiya 1/100th scale F4 Phantom 2 is a bit of a dated kit. It's not the most accurate details wise, has a few gaps in the build, and the instructions are not very easy to read. This model is very much like the Airfix Vintage Classic kits, old but still a lot of fun to build. I'm not sure about everyone watching, but I don't mind easy fix work on models, and though not a perfect model for beginners, this sort of kit would be great practice for a light introduction to things like sanding and filling for a new modeler, as though these issues are there, they're not hard to fix. Overall, the kit is really easy to make. I enjoyed making it as a casual build in between much bigger, modern, in-depth models. One thing to watch out for when painting the first few coats of paint on the plane: if paint gets into any gaps, especially the ones around and under the exhaust, it can and will find its way into the cockpit glass from inside, potentially messing up a nice clear canopy. So make sure to leave this plane right way up when driving and not water paint down too much so it doesn't flow so far, or even better, leave the glass off until it's all done. New versions of this kit go for around 16 quid, which, if they have the same quality as this model, is a bit steep for this kit. I haven't looked into them though, so I'm not sure if more work has been done to the moulds. However, a quick eBay showed a lot of these old kits going for between £5 to a tenner, which I think is a good price for this kit. Anyway, that's my build and review of the Tamiya 1/100th scale F4 Phantom 2. As always, thank you for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed the build and found it helpful if you're building or thinking of buying this model at home. Until next time, look after yourselves and have a good one. Goodbye.